What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name's Kyle. Today, February 23rd, it's a Friday, so happy Friday, everybody. We have the NFL Combine starting next week. Players are going to start reporting in heights and weights and getting all their measurements in and interviews and just all the workouts. So big week next week. So I just wanted to make this video. We're going to be going over the rookie wide receivers, a bunch of advanced data that I collected and put together for you guys. So we'll hop into a screen share and I'll explain in a second here once I get it pulled up. But what I did is I went through PFF's data and crunched a bunch of the numbers. And what we're going to be looking at today is about 10 or so stats that really matter and are considered advanced metrics for the wide receiver class. Now, what happened was I went through as many players as I could find that were in this year's class, and I kind of cut it off at about 34-ish wide receivers. So I have all of the data here, and there is a link in the description if you guys want to check it out. We're going to be looking at a bunch of metrics today, but at the top of the article, it's just the stats from last year. And this MDD is the kind of consensus mock draft database ranking for each player right now. So you guys know the names: Marvin Harrison, Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas. After those guys, there's a lot of questions on which receivers are the next best, but this is just the top column is just their stats. So if you guys want to look at those, I got the height, the weight, receptions, targets, yards, and touchdowns. So there's some big names on this list here, some big seasons by a lot of these guys. But that's just the stats tab. So you guys can see all 34 wide receivers here. And then I come down to this one here, and I'm just going to enlarge this again. And this one is an interesting chart because it shows the slot snaps, the wide out snaps, the slot yards, and the deep yards. And so you can see there's stats for all 32 of these receivers in this column. So if you're looking for guys that run mostly slot, nobody ran more slot snaps last year than Malik Washington. 406 routes. Isaiah Williams, 371. Luke McCaffrey, Taj Washington, Jacob Cowing, Malachi Corley, Joshua Cephas, Jordan Whittington, and Aeneas Smith. Malik Nabers did run a lot of slot snaps as well. You know, compared to the other top end guys, he was probably the predominant slot guy. So look through that. You know, you have all the reps here, slot and wide. Rome Odunze led the way with wide snaps here. Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas, Troy Franklin, big time outside receivers. Then you guys can check out the slot and the deep yards. But let's get into the meat of the video. And what I did here is I'm showing the overall PFF grades for players 1 through 6, and then the bottom 6 of the data study, which was 32 players, the bottom 6 guys. If you guys want the full access to it, you guys can join the Patreon. It's all there. $8 a month, you know, advanced wide receiver data here. You got some downloads for you guys. And then you can find all the running back downloads and a bunch of other dynasty rankings and things like that. So check out the Patreon if you guys want some of this data. When you open it up, this is what the PDF is going to look like here. So you guys have everything that you need in here. And I'll just kind of show you. I'll give you a freebie here. So this is the overall grades for the 32 wide receivers that are in this class here. So Malik Nabers graded out 92.9 overall. Malik Washington a 91.1. Really fun slot receiver out of Virginia. Marvin Harrison was the 3rd ranked player. Rome Odunze. So the top 3 consensus wide receivers in this class all ranked in the top 4 of PFF grade. Joshua Cephas from UTSA, Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, Ladd McConkey, Malachi Corley, and Xavier Legette were the top 10 receivers in PFF grade. The bottom 10 receivers, the one that I think we should note, Jacob Cowing is a slot receiver there. Anthony Gould out of Oregon State. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint out of Georgia. Brian Thomas, poor grade last year for having such a great season. 74.2 overall PFF grade. Adonai Mitchell, a really poor grade here, ranking 26th out of this 32-player sample with 71.9. Cornelius Johnson, Keon Coleman down here pretty far with a 70.3. Xavier Worthy, Jalen McMillan, Devontae Walker, and Jordan Whittington. So that's the full data set. And you guys can check out, again, the Patreon if you guys want to unlock all that. But for what I'm doing here on the website, you can see the top 6 players and the bottom 6 players. So PFF grade overall, I mean, typically anything startable worthy is in the 80s and definitely the 90s. So Malik Nabers, Malik Washington, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, all checking the boxes there at the high-end scores. And not a lot of people know about Malik Washington yet. He's only 5'8", but he's 194 pounds. For comparison, Troy Franklin, who's a potential first-round pick, he's 6'3", but he weighs 187. Malik Washington's about 4 or 5 inches shorter and weighs a good 5 to 7 pounds more than Troy Franklin. So Malik Washington, really exciting player. He can be a starting slot for someone someday. He's probably a day two value at some point here, but keep an eye out from Malik Washington at the combine. I'm excited about here. And then I'm just going to shout out again, Keon Coleman, one of the bottom 6 guys in PFF grade. Same with Xavier Worthy. These guys are fringe first rounders, but they're ranking pretty low in the PFF grade. Moving on to grade versus man coverage, which I think is very important. You know, we want players that can operate in man coverage and get open and create separation. Players ranking at the top of this list, the top 6 guys: Malik Neighbors with a 90.8 grade against man, Romo Dunze 89.5 grade against man, Malik Washington, Anthony Gold, Joshua Cephas, and Xavier Legette, all top 6 players in this class from a man grade perspective. Guys in the bottom of this grade here: Jalen McMillan, Brian Thomas Jr., Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, Ladd McConkey, which we haven't talked about yet, Devontae Walker, and Cornelius Johnson. So Ladd McConkey is a player that's kind of in that, he's like a fringe, first rounder. He seems to be like an early day 2 guy for a lot of people, and he's going to be a starting slot at the next level here. Not so good against man, but you'll see his zone grade turned out pretty well here. So grade versus man, you're looking at, Neighbors, Odunze being studs again. The name that's not on here, though, is Marvin Harrison Jr., which is a little strange, but overall, those are the names to keep an eye on. And then let's go ahead and look at the grades versus zone coverage, which I think it's a really good skill. You got to be able to find the soft spot in the zone and kind of be open for wide receivers. So this is where you see more slot-ish receivers excel. So Malik Neighbors, he was the best zone and the best man player graded by PFF in 2023. Love Malik Neighbors. Nothing bad to say about Malik Neighbors. Malik Washington, again, his name keeps popping up here, so the PFF metrics really like him. There's Ladd McConkey. So he was a bottom 6 receiver in man coverage, number 3 overall in zone coverage. And, if you think about, the Cooper Kupps and guys like Deontay Johnson and all your favorite white slot receiver, essentially, that's what Ladd McConkey can be. But interesting that he was a top 3 zone player and not so good in the man coverage. He can get open versus man, but there you have Luke McCaffrey from Rice, 86.8. Romo Dunze, again, he's a top 5 player in man and versus zone. And then there's Marvin Harrison Jr. finding the weak spots in the zone, 84.2 grade. Bottom 6 players against zone coverage: Jalen McMillan, Jacob Cowing, Adonai Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Keon Coleman, and Anthony Gold. So a little bit of a ding here. Keon Coleman's considered a first-round prospect, and same with Adonai Mitchell. Both not ranking very good in zone. They weren't on the bottom list, though, for man coverage, so that should be okay. But there's your grade versus zone and man. And now we're going to get into more of the advanced data metrics here, which actually are quantified. So contested catch percentile ranking here, number 1 player being Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan with an 81.8% contested rate. Now, he didn't have a huge sample, so that number might not be as important. But a guy like Romo Dunze, I'm going to come out and say he was the best player in contested percentile ranking just based on targets and receptions and just the amount of volume that he had at Washington. So 75% catch rate in contested situations, fantastic out of Romo Dunze. Now, this is the first time we're talking about Taj Washington, but, if you go to watch Caleb Williams and you see Brendan Rice and Taj Washington's a really fun player, and I think he's going to be a nice player at the next level. 66.7% contested rate for him. There's Malik Washington. There's Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, and Luke McCaffrey popping up again. Bottom 6 players in contested catch percentile ranking: Xavier Worthy. He's really small. He's got decent height, 6'1", but 172 pounds, very small frame. Malachi Corley, not the best contested catcher, 23.5%. Isaiah Williams, Jamari Thrash, Jordan Whittington, and Jalen McMillan. Let's go ahead and move on to a really fun stat: yards per route run. Now, at the top of the list, you got Malik Neighbors, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Javon Baker, and then there's Malik Washington. Again, these guys are all well above 3 yards per route run. Malik Neighbors setting the pace at 3.64, and Malik Washington, again, popping up on a lot of these lists, 3.15 yards per route run. So these guys were all pretty elite at yards per route run. And then you're looking down here, the bottom 6 players: Luke McCaffrey, Jacob Cowing, Cornelius Johnson, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, Jordan Whittington. So this is kind of a red flag for me. You have two potential first-round players, Keon Coleman and Adonai Mitchell, both 6'4". Keon Coleman's a lot bigger, though, a lot thicker of a frame than Adonai Mitchell. And they struggle to create separation, and they struggle to, they're on the field a lot, but they're not really earning targets. So that's what this means. Their yards per route run are pretty low because they're running a lot of routes, not getting a lot of yards. So slightly concerned there. I do like both players with what they can do, but I think, raise the red flag a little bit on these yards per route run stats. The drop percentage, I don't really care too much about this one, but we'll go off of it. Jermaine Burton and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, 0% drop rate last year. There's Joshua Cephas, Taj Washington, Adonai Mitchell, Aeneas Smith, the best 6 receivers in drop percentage. I think that's percentile ranking. Bottom 6 players, some names here: Cornelius Johnson, Troy Franklin had some drops, 10% drop rate, Jalen McMillan, Javon Baker, Johnny Wilson from Florida State, and Jamari Thrash. I did want to note Marvin Harrison Jr. had like an 8-point-something drop rate last year, not his best season in that stat, but overall, I don't care too much about drops. If I see it again on film and over, and especially if they're body catchers, that is a little bit of a thing. But you can fix drops. You can always fix drops. That's one of the most fixable traits of a receiver, unless they're not, they're officially stone hand. But anyways, average depth of target, ADOT. I don't care too much about this one because guys can win with different ADOTs. But Jermaine Burton, 20.2 average depth of target. Devontae Walker, 18.2. Javon Baker, 17.1. Adonai Mitchell, Rome Odunze, Brendan Rice, 15.1. Now, what I like about this is average depth of target kind of paints a picture of like where's that player being used on the field. So guys like Adonai Mitchell, he's a field stretcher. He can go deep. Rome Odunze, for as much as he offers on tape with almost a full route tree, 15.5 ADOT, like they can use him anywhere. So he does a lot of everything. He ran a lot of routes last year. And then Brendan Rice is a good field stretcher as well. Guys with ADOTs at the bottom of the pack here: Joshua Cephas, Isaiah Williams out of Illinois, Malik Washington, a slot player again, Jordan Whittington, Texas, Jacob Cowing, Arizona, Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. So these are all guys that are predominantly slot players, getting the ball early, running those quick slants, out routes, things like that to get the ball in their hands so they can work in space. So not a huge one, but it does kind of paint a picture of where they're used on the field. This one I think is very important: yards after catch per reception. So YACR is another term for this here, but Taj Washington out of USC he was tied with Malachi Corley in the NCAA or this 2024 class with 8.6 yards after catch per reception. So just catching the ball and being able to add 8.6 yards to your play is a huge, huge upside. And it really shows what he can do with the ball after his hand, and is just in terms of his elusiveness and his ability to just get up the field. So I like Taj Washington quite a bit. I like Malachi Corley quite a bit. Xavier Worthy, Javon Baker, Joshua Cephas, Jamari Thrash. These guys are all fast players. Guys at the bottom of the list here in yards after catch per reception: Roman Wilson, 4.6 yards after catch per reception. Johnny Wilson, the big man from Florida State there, Jermaine Burton, Adonai Mitchell, Devontae Walker, Cornelius Johnson. These guys just aren't as elusive with the ball after the catch. Moving on to missed tackles force rate, that kind of also implies, it doesn't imply, but it kind of correlates a little bit with yards after catch per reception. If you're making guys miss, you're going to have more yards after catch. So number 1 on the list, Aeneas Smith, Texas A&M, with a 37% missed tackle rate. Malik Neighbors, he's so good, 33.71% missed tackle rate. Jordan Whittington, Malik Washington making people miss, Taj Washington making people miss, and Ladd McConkey. I think these names keep coming up: Malik Washington, Taj Washington, Ladd McConkey. These guys are really good players. They can get the ball open quick, and they can make people miss. I like all 3 of those guys. Guys on the bottom of this list: Jermaine Burton, Alabama, Marvin Harrison, not making a lot of people miss. And he's a 6'4", 205. He's a bigger guy. It's hard to make people miss tackles when you're that big. So I get it. Hopefully he can be a little bit more elusive at the next level. Anthony Gold, Devontae Walker, Roman Wilson, and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. So that's missed tackles forced rate. This one was interesting. I kind of did a little study here of man plus zone grades and then man plus zone QBR when targeted. So the player, and this is what I did. So man grades here, zone grades here, man QBR, and zone QBR. And what I did is I just added all of these numbers up. And the number one player when you're taking his man in zone grade and his man in zone QBR, it was Troy Franklin, a 449.8. Malik Neighbors coming in at number 2 with 439.8. And then Roman Wilson, really good player. He did not have great man grade and zone grades, but his effectiveness was off the charts here. His man QBR was 115, and his zone QBR was one of the best in the country, 153.3. So I like Roman Wilson, his ability to get open is pretty nice. Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU coming in with the high ranking, Taj Washington, and then Xavier Legette. We haven't talked much about Legette. He's a big receiver. I've seen people kind of compare him to an A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf type body. His biggest knock is that he's a fifth-year senior, 23 years old. He dominated his senior year. Really nothing else in his college career. So he's kind of a one-hit wonder. We'll see if he can do that at the next level. And then guys at the bottom of the list here that we're probably not as excited about: Johnny Wilson, Anthony Gold, Luke McCaffrey, Devontae Walker, Xavier Worthy keeps popping up on some of these bottom lists, and then Cornelius Johnson. And then what I did here, this will be the final thing that we look at for today, the total score. What I did is I have a 32 sample set of wide receivers. I went through and I ranked everybody 1 through 32 based on where they were in the stats here. And then I just tallied up the scores. And I know this is not a super good way of evaluating things, but I just thought it'd be fun to kind of, quantitate this and get some numbers on it. So Malik Neighbors coming in with the best score. He ranks first in grade, yards per out run, man grade, zone grade, number 2 in missed tackles forced. Contested catch percentage was middle of the pack, drop percentage was middle of the pack, and his man QBR was middle of the pack. But everything else is fantastic with Malik Neighbors. He's the number 2 receiver in this class, hands down. You can maybe make an argument that he might be a better fantasy receiver than Marvin Harrison Jr. Malik Washington, really strong player. His worst number came in the man QBR rating, but everything else was basically top 5. Taj Washington, another exciting player here. Just again, a lot of top 5 numbers here. His worst stat was his zone grade, so more of a man beater. But number 3 ranking for Taj Washington. So get to know your Washingtons, people. Romo Dunze at 4, Troy Franklin at 5, and then Javon Baker, the 6'1", 208 receiver out of UCF. He's got some nice stuff on tape. He was like pretty much last in the drop rating. He would have been much higher if you didn't rank 30th out of 32 in the drop percentages. And then guys at the bottom of the list that we have to look at with maybe some red flags here: Devontae Walker, Adonai Mitchell, Jacob Cowing, Cornelius Johnson, Jordan Whittington, and Jalen McMillan. So I'm not super fans of a lot of these receivers here, but Adonai Mitchell is the one that I'm struggling with because I like his tape so much, but he's coming out poorly in a lot of these advanced metrics. But that's it. That's the video. You guys can go check this out. There's a link in the description, or I'll put it in the comments. Your advanced wide receiver metrics. Also check out the Patreon if you guys want to see the full data study. But either way, that's it for me. I'm going to try and it's NFL Combine week next weekend, so I'm kind of waiting to put out more content until we get all that information out. But either way, enjoy your weekend. We'll see you guys in a future video. Peace.